All right, so your case has moved to the negotiation phase. What does that mean? So what it basically means is that your medical treatment has stabilized to the point where we have a basic understanding of what medical treatment you required, what your injuries were, and what the long-term ramifications of them are going to be for you. So we feel like we can now have a conversation with the insurance company about trying to resolve your case. Where it goes from here, though, is dependent on a number of factors, which would really be specific to your case. But generally speaking, there's two paths forward. One is that when we invite the insurance company to engage us in negotiations, they respond, they start making offers, we negotiate back and forth with them. They'll always start with an offer much lower than what they're actually willing to pay. So we try to negotiate with them, provide them with details as to why they should pay more, and through a back and forth process, hopefully they get to a number where your attorney's going to call you up and say, hey, here's what I think the value of your case is, tell me what your thoughts are, and here's what the insurance company's offering. And based on that conversation, you and the attorney can make a decision as to whether or not it makes sense to sell the case at this point. Obviously, if the insurance company is making an offer that you think is reasonable at the end of the day, because it's your decision to make, then the case will settle. The other path is that, and it's one that probably happens more often than not, which is that before we file a lawsuit, which is where your case is at right now, the insurance company will either not make an offer simply because they're just they need more information, or they're being difficult, or they'll make an offer that's much less than what we think the case is really worth. And they oftentimes do that because I think a lot of attorneys and even a lot of clients just aren't really prepared to go, the extra mile, with a case. And so the insurance company is basically testing us. They might make a very modest offer to see if you'll take it, or to see if the attorney is going to encourage you to take it, even if it's one that's not really in keeping with the value of your case. So sometimes they kind of force us into filing a lawsuit, either because they're not making an offer or because they're not making a good offer. And then we file a lawsuit. And if we file a lawsuit, we'll talk more about that as we get to that stage and what that's all about. But one important thing to know is that 98 to 99% of the cases that are filed, in other words, a lawsuit is filed, they still end up with an out-of-court settlement. So we'll likely still get to that same place where we're negotiating back and forth and ultimately come to a settlement, whether it's in litigation or outside of litigation. It's really just a question of timing and what we have to do to get to that point. But that's essentially what we'll do now, and as I just said, kind of time will tell exactly where the case goes from here. If we're able to resolve it at this stage, then great. If not, then we're prepared to move forward into litigation, and you should be too, because again, oftentimes the insurance companies won't really pay full value on a case until you do that.